What's up, my comic comrades? You would be hard-pressed to find a comic book fan that doesn't love or respect Jack the King Kirby. I mean, the guy co-created half of all mainstream comics, like Thor, Captain America, Black Panther, Iron Man, Avengers, and the list goes on. And one of my favorite things he did was creating the New Gods for DC Comics, which debuted with New Gods issue 1 in March of 1971. And unlike most comic book characters and titles, Jack Kirby is the sole creator for the New Gods. He came up with the concept and characters, as well as drew and wrote the series. So let's see what the New Gods are all about. The New Gods are a product of Kirby going to work for DC Comics in the 70s. While working with DC, he introduced what's known as the Fourth World concept. Fourth World is essentially a universe with eternal conflict between good and evil that was solely told by Jack Kirby. And for those of you wondering, the Fourth World is outside of the conventional multiverse, with New Genesis and Apocalypse being on completely opposite ends of one another in the multiverse. I say all this because within the Fourth World universe exists the New Gods, who are a group of ancient deities that use their powers in a never-ending fight between good and evil. Now, the reason the New Gods have an eternal struggle between good and evil is because Fourth World has two twin planets, New Genesis and Apocalypse. But it wasn't always that way. You see, New Genesis and Apocalypse were once a single planet named Urgrund, home of the old gods, but it was destroyed with Ragnarok and split into two different planets, one being New Genesis and the other being Apocalypse. New Genesis being their heaven, so to speak, while Apocalypse is their hell. That's not literal, that's just the best way to describe it, as New Genesis is full of peaceful, compassionate new gods, while Apocalypse is quite the opposite. But not only would Ragnarok lead to the creation of New Genesis and Apocalypse, when the old gods fell, it led to the creation of the new gods, filling the void. Some of the new gods lived on New Genesis, and some lived on Apocalypse. The new gods of New Genesis are ruled by Highfather, while the new gods of Apocalypse are ruled by Darkseid. Now, this is how the new gods were created and their respected worlds. But let's talk a little bit more about the new gods themselves. The new gods live outside of space and time in the realm called Fourth World, which I just explained to you. Living so close to the source, which is the energy or god that created all life in DC Comics, the new gods have evolved. I mean, plain and simple, the new gods are just that. Gods. They have superior technology and are quite literally genetic and evolutionary perfection. With that said, this isn't completely true with the New Gods of Apocalypse. Many of its inhabitants are inferior, with only a handful of beings being superior to humans. Now, while the New Gods are obviously gods, what does that mean power-wise exactly? Does that mean they could just obliterate people with a wave of their hand, all Dr. Manhattan style? No, it doesn't, at least not all of them. So while they're gods in the sense that they're immortal and have great power, not all of them can create life or destroy life with the snap of a finger. Having said that, there are a couple who can. But to break down their overall powers more specifically, they're immortal. Like I just said, they possess pretty good invulnerability and have super strength, stamina, and reflexes. But some new gods like Highfather and Darkseid possess powers way beyond that. One example of each would be Highfather being able to manipulate incredible amounts of energy, which allows him to transverse through space and time, bring creatures back to life, and do all sorts of other crazy things with his Alpha effect. As for Darkseid, he has the Omega effect, or Omega beams, which is one of his deadliest weapons. Said effect is capable of annihilating almost anything in its path. With this power, he could also send or get something from different places in time, dimensions, or even universes. So needless to say, Darkseid and Highfather are top dogs when it comes to the New Gods. Something you may also have noticed is that the New Gods are very similar to Marvel's Eternals. And that's entirely because Jack Kirby created both the New Gods and the Eternals. However, the New Gods were first, but the title was canceled before he was able to give the story a definite ending. So several years later, when Kirby returned to Marvel, he created the Eternals to continue a similar story. And crazy enough, the New Gods and Eternals are both getting the blockbuster movie treatment. But before I wrap this up and give all of you reading recommendations, I do want to name some of the most prominent New Gods of New Genesis and Apocalypse. On New Genesis, you have Highfather, Orion, Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, Metron, and Light Ray. Then on Apocalypse, we have Darkseid, Calabac, Desaad, Steppenwolf, Granny Goodness, and the Female Furies. But if you're looking to read some New God goodness, check out The New Gods by Jack Kirby, Tom King's Mr. Miracle book, Orion by Walt Simonson, and Justice League Volume 7, Darkseid War. And that's going to bring another episode of Variant to a close. But if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to check out our Eternals episode, because again, it was also created by Jack Kirby. Other than that, if you like the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us out. But I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things comics.